president's debt speech a failure? Here to weigh in is former White House press secretary and co-host of The Five, Perino. What did you make of that when you heard Chris Matthews, who's always a supporter of President Obama, say that?
Well, it reminded me that Chris also has had experience working in a White House. And sometimes, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you are on, if you have been behind the trenches, you look and you kind of know when you use an East Room address and when you might call for an Oval Office address, when you might just use the diplomatic reception room, maybe just use the Rose Garden. Those locations matter, but in addition, Chris's point is you have to have something to say. And in an address like that, you either want to lay out a policy, like, for example, President Bush, when I was there in May of 2007, gave the first Oval Office address on a domestic policy issue, and it was on immigration. And it was a well-thought-out speech. When I first heard that President Obama was going to do a policy speech, an address to the nation, asking the networks to preempt primetime coverage, I thought, they must have a deal.
That's exactly what I thought. Or he was going to announce his plan. In my mind, it was one of the two things that he was going to come forward. So are there rules? Are there any kind of rules that you have to follow in order to do this?
Not really. I think there are some traditions, and this White House has blazed a lot of new trails, and it will be up to whichever president comes, whenever that is, in the future, whether or not they want to go back to more of the traditional use of the areas and the time. I did think that it also hurt President Obama that he hadn't taken questions from the press from March until just in the last couple of weeks. And then 3 times in a row, he took questions from the White House briefing room podium. And I thought, you know, Jay Carney must want to kick him out of there. That's his room.
Well, Jay Carney was there yesterday. Maybe he didn't want to be, because this is what happened.
What was the point of giving a primetime address to the nation without an Obama plan? Why not just release that plan?
It's not a plan.
No,
it's not. It was details of the plan, but it wasn't a plan the same way that we're getting a plan on the House side or we're getting a plan on the Senate side.
We don't know what the Medicare thing is. We don't know what the Social Security part of this is. There wasn't. I mean, there was a lot of.
We talked in great detail about what's in Medicare, and you know it.
Why not put it out there?
So initially, Ed Henry, who's new to Fox, asked the question, why did he have this primetime address without a plan? What was interesting was that the other reporters asked the same questions.
Right,
because Carney originally tried to make it like it was a Fox question.
Right, which is funny to me, because Ed Henry is a long-established, fantastic reporter in Washington. He had been a print reporter. He worked for another network. When I was press secretary, he sat over there, and he worked for that network. He is solid, and they know communications at the White House. It's obvious that you don't go and give a East Room national televised address in prime time and not say anything except, I hope you call your congressman. That, I think, even to them, that was like, it doesn't make any sense. Plus, you and I know that if you were doing a negotiation and you were maybe trying to sell a house, you'd want the piece of paper to look at it and make sure everything was fine. The fact that the White House is trying to get away with saying they don't need to put out a plan, but they can just undermine everybody else's and throw their own majority leader, Senator Reid, under the bus is perplexing to reporters, and I'm glad that they finally started asking some tougher questions.
Exactly. So, where do you see this going now that you've had an inside look from inside the White House in a prior administration? What's going to happen?
I've given this some thought because I'm glad I'm not there. I can imagine that the pressure on all sides, including in the Speaker's office and the Majority Leader's office, is very, very intense. I don't know where it's going. I know I'm going to Cheyenne Frontier Days.
You're escaping
to Wyoming. Yes.
But what do you make of the fact that the Boehner plan now needs to be readjusted? Do you think it will be readjusted to suit the conservatives or the Democrats?
I think probably the conservatives. I mean, the conservatives are the ones who have really driven this debate. In the absence of President Obama having a concrete plan, he's allowed the ground to be ceded to the Republicans. And instead of not doing anything, they have put forward a plan. Okay, so it has to be adjusted. They can adjust it and they'll move forward. Right now, the only train leaving the station is the Boehner plan.
Right.
When President Obama spoke the other night, he talked about tax hikes. The tax hikes aren't in either bill, Senator Reid's or in Boehner's. And so it was so bizarre, and I don't know where it goes.
Okay, so let's say that this Boehner bill goes through the House, then it has to go to the Senate. They'll make adjustments to it, no doubt. Then it has to go back to the House, right? And then it would go to the president's desk, ostensibly. He says, unequivocally, he's going to veto this. Would he actually do that on the final day?
There was an interesting thing about that, too, last night. They did a veto threat from the White House that a lot of reporters read to have a little bit of wiggle room. Then, about 4 hours later, they put out a statement clarifying the veto statement, saying there wasn't any wiggle room. I will tell you, having been there, when you do a veto statement, it's very clear. I will veto the bill if X, Y, and Z. No wiggle room. If you're explaining your veto threat, you are mushy in your language, and I think they did give themselves some space because they don't want to default. They have the tools to prevent default. I think the Boehner plan eventually, with some tweaks, gets passed, and Republicans would be smart not to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory here.